Carmelo Anthony Speaks. I'm Barry Trammell along with Thunder writers Eric Horn and Brett Dawson. This is a Thunder Thursday, and guys, it's the middle of summer, but stuff keeps happening in Thunderland, including Carmelo Anthony has broken his silence. He spoke, made some public comments about his days with the Thunder, being traded to Atlanta, going to get bought out. What do we make of what Carmelo Anthony told Jamil Hill, Eric?
Well, kind of falls in line with some of the things we'd heard. This guy saying that basically he didn't think it was a good fit. We saw it on the court. It worked sometimes. A lot of times it didn't work. The Thunder has professed that it wasn't a great fit. Carmelo has. They worked together to collaborate to get a deal done and get him out of there. I thought it was interesting that he said he felt rushed, or the whole process felt rushed going into training camp. I think that was something that people had kind of established as well. And it looked it to start, the first 20 or so games, it really looked like something that was just kind of a hodgepodge of things coming together. This was originally supposed to be Patrick Patterson as the starter with Paul George and Russell Westbrook, Steven Adams, Andre Robertson, and then you throw Carmelo into the mix. And basically Billy Donovan's got to go back to the drawing board and figure out some new ways to integrate him. So I don't think it was anything that was particularly mind-blowing in what Carmelo Anthony said. It was just interesting for him to kind of clarify some of the portions of the things he said in his exit interview when he said they didn't have a plan or whatever. I think that was kind of a confusing part of the exit interviews, and I think he kind of clarified that with just the whole being rushed into the season and it being kind of a short notice trade.
Brett, do you think that's legit concern by Carmelo, the fact that he was rushed? Guys get traded mid-season a lot. I mean, sometimes it's not like you're on the eve of training camp. You're on the eve of a Tuesday game in Milwaukee.
It's legit in the sense that I think Billy Donovan had a plan for the way he was going to play, and then Carmelo Anthony changed that plan. I don't really necessarily buy into the idea. One of the things Carmelo said, and expanding on that, is that he had to figure some things out on his own. There wasn't really anybody here doing it for him. I'm not sure that's fair. I do think there probably was some collaboration. There was a lot of talk, I know, over the course of the year, not just between Billy Donovan and Carmelo, but between Carmelo and Russell Westbrook and Paul George in terms of figuring out how they play together, what the best way for them to play was. So I don't think everything was kind of thrown on Carmelo in the way he portrayed it there, but I do think the training camp eve trade was a real issue.
When you look at the way it went down with Carmelo, in the middle, when they were playing, there were no signs of discontent, really. I mean, you could see frustration in a game or something, a game situation, but no really outward signs of any kind of turmoil. But before the season, Carmelo pretty much staked his claim to your question, Eric, when you said, about coming off the bench, and he thought that was high comedy. After the season, he's, this really isn't working. I don't much care for this. What's the chances that privately, in the middle, it really was a little bit of a struggle internally and chemistry-wise?
I mean, in terms of the style of basketball, yeah, it probably was a struggle. I don't think the question of him coming off the bench was ever a question with the Thunder. I think that was just kind of a ceremonial or a thing where that was just an understood. He was going to start. You could take that for what it is. The minutes were probably more of an issue than actually starting or coming off of the bench. But more so, you just had to see where Carmelo's mindset was in terms of him being able to sacrifice and do all the things necessary to make this team the best team possible. That's really what that question was about. But, Carmelo might have had an idea of what he wanted to do in his role when he came in the trade. It was a quick trade. He agreed to it. He might have wanted to play more of the isolation game that he wanted to, take some of the shots that he wanted to. And the Thunder clearly had an objective for him to take more threes, be more of a catch and shoot guy. And that's something that he expressed at the end of the year that he didn't want to do, or that was something he wasn't comfortable doing. So I think that's part of the disconnect more so than the chemistry issues. I think they were fine in terms of the chemistry, but the disconnect was what he wanted to do as opposed to what the Thunder wanted him to accomplish on the court.
How are we going to look back at Carmelo Anthony in the state of Oklahoma?
Fun. I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed the Carmelo Anthony experience.
Well, I did too. I assume the media did. But if you're a fan, Carmelo zoomed in late September, zoomed out in late July, 10 months as a Thunder. Is he going to be a footnote? I think you wrote about this, Brett. Is he going to be a footnote? Is he going to be looked back fondly? Sam has talked about, hey, I'm sort of Sam Presti. We're proud that Carmelo was part of the Thunder.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see going forward. I think some of his, if you want to call it a legacy here, is going to be determined by what happens next. If he goes to Houston and has a couple of really good years there, I think the Thunder thing will be really forgettable. It'll be a sort of, you'll list the teams that Carmelo Anthony played for and you'll sort of forget the Thunder. If he goes to the Rockets and that doesn't work and then he finds another team, I think the Thunder will be part of this piece of Carmelo Anthony's legacy. He bounces from team to team kind of at the end. So some of that will be a little bit defined by what's yet to come, but I do think it'll largely be a forgettable year. It'll be, here was a Hall of Famer who kind of stopped through, and you won't think a whole lot about Carmelo Anthony as a Thunder. At one point he said during the year, nobody's going to remember, 10 years from now, Melo shot whatever percent it was, his first 3 months in Oklahoma City. As it turns out, people may not remember the last 7 months very much either.
If he goes somewhere else, if he goes to Houston and fits into what they want to do, I think it's going to be an indictment of the Thunder not being able to integrate a star talent. Carmelo Anthony was a guy who shot 37% on catch and shoot three-pointers. There was reason to believe that he could come back next year and improve upon that number. If he goes to Houston and plays for a coach that he had problems with in New York, if he can have that be water under the bridge, he can play with Chris Paul and James Harden and shoot a good volume of three-pointers and make them at a higher rate than he did with the Thunder, I think that'll say more about the Thunder's culture than it will about Carmelo Anthony's overall legacy.
What's the chances that happens?
I think it's a good opportunity. I think it's a good chance. I don't think Houston's necessarily going to be a better team, but I don't think they're going to fall off as much as people think. I think the addition of James Ennis, a guy who's going to be a Trevor Ariza replacement in terms of that small forward role, I think he's going to help there. And Carmelo's a guy who, look, if anybody can get the most out of him in terms of his offensive output, I think it's a team with him surrounded by James Harden and Chris Paul, two guys who are elite ball shot creators, guys who can create for their own shot off the dribble and can create for others. I think there's a high probability that Carmelo Anthony can come back rejuvenated with Houston.
The other thing is I just don't know that he could catch and shoot shots a lot worse than he did. He just had a bad shooting year. I would expect he's going to get somewhat better looks with Houston, and he's going to shoot a better percentage.
And we can always remember Carmelo Anthony this way. He brought Dennis Schroeder here. If that goes great, you can thank Carmelo Anthony. If it doesn't, you think, well.
Look, you give Sam Presti credit. He's able to take things that look like depreciating assets and at least turn them into something. He's done that multiple times before. He's done that with Cameron Payne. He's done that with an Enes Kanter. He's done that with a Carmelo Anthony now. So even when a trade doesn't look like it's an overall victory for the Thunder, he's able to parlay that into something, some kind of asset that can be beneficial to the Thunder and their team going forward.
The other thing about the Carmelo legacy part is just like how much did Carmelo's arrival have to do with just laying a foundation, a sales pitch to Paul George that the Thunder's going to do what it takes to win, cost be damned. If it costs money to go get Carmelo, if it costs players to go get Carmelo Anthony, they're going to do it. If you got to then flip Carmelo into something else, they're going to do that. I think that was important from that standpoint. I can't say how much Carmelo had to do with long-term locking in Russell Westbrook or Paul George, but I do think it helped in that early part of kind of the getting to know you phase with Paul George of saying, this is the way we do things around here. We're going to try to do what we need to do to help you guys win.
Enough about Carmelo Anthony. Let's talk about some newcomers to the Thunder. And Hamidou Diallo has signed a contract, second-round pick from Kentucky. Earlier, a few days ago, Celtics trade for Abdel Nader. This is the Thunder seems to be collecting more wings than a chicken restaurant. I mean, by my count, counting Cal Singler, more than half the squad is wings. 8 out of 15 guys are shooting guards or small forwards or some combination thereof. What's going on, Eric, with the construction of this roster?
It's a shift to the modern NBA, and the Thunder, they needed to do this. They already had pieces that were versatile in Andre Robertson and Paul George, guys who could play multiple positions, Jeremy Grant, but they're continuing to do that. I mean, all the guys they've brought in since the draft, 24 years or younger, can play multiple positions from small forward, shooting guard, even a little bit of power forward, a guy like Abdel Nader who's a stout 6'6", 225, 230. So the Thunder's getting with the modern times. Steven Adams is really the only true center on the roster now. Nerlens Noel is even a guy who can go out and guard on the perimeter and play some power forward. So it's a nice, young, versatile bunch that they're bringing in, and it kind of plays to the way that Billy Donovan wants to mold this team going forward.
What do you make of this wing stop, Brett?
Well, I mean, look, 2 years ago, this is a team trying to figure out How do we get Enes Kanter and Steven Adams on the floor together? How do we make that work? How can you do it against the best teams? So this represents a real change. I mean, it is a change of catching up with the times. But it's also, in a way, it's true to what the Thunder has always done from a youth standpoint. That's the area where this looks like the Thunder has looked. 24 years old, as Eric said, and younger. Hamidou Diallo hasn't turned 20 yet. So the Thunder got younger, it got more versatile, and it got faster. And I think the key point here now is Billy Donovan wants to play a certain way. He wants to get the ball up and down the floor. He wants the ball to move and not stick with one player. That's why Dennis Schroeder is here to play some with Russell Westbrook. Now, the big question is, can Billy Donovan implement that system? Will Russell Westbrook play in it and thrive in it? It's not really an excuse of the roster now. You've got the pieces you want. So let's see if the Thunder can define a style and play to that style.
We said this going into last year too, Barry. It's an important year for Billy Donovan. This one even more so. After this year, he's going to have one more year left on his deal. It's hard for teams to part with coaches when they have 2 years, 3 years left on deals. When you get to that final year, it gets a little bit easier for teams to say, okay, look, we'll cut bait. That's what the Thunder did with Scott Brooks. They cut bait with him with 1 year left on his deal. So this is an important year for Billy Donovan. And make no mistake, the Thunder has made moves to cater to what Billy Donovan wants to do. So, bringing in a Dennis Schroeder, bringing in faster guys like Hamidou Diallo, and a plethora of wings that the Thunder has gone out of their way to go get to downsize and make their team smaller and more versatile, that's a Billy Donovan blueprint. So for him to be able to keep his job and to keep going and get an extension and to keep this project going, he's going to have to, make some groundwork with the guy that he's brought in the last couple months.
And this is really the first time. I mean, Billy Donovan inherited a roster, and then Kevin Durant left, and then they sort of changed that roster on the fly, and then they went out the next year and got Paul George and Carmelo Anthony. So they've changed the team a whole lot. This is the first time they've kind of taken a beat, and what's significant in that is Westbrook, George, Adams are locked up, and so now you're working on the periphery, and that allows you to kind of build a team that's to your liking. This is the first time Billy Donovan has really had a lot of say in the roster that he's going to coach, and so now it's on him to get that done, and on Westbrook as well.
When you look at these wings, what I count as 8 wings,
A-piece.
2 or 3 are established NBA players. We know what Paul George is. He's a superstar. We know what Andre Robertson is. He's an elite defender who can help you athletically, not so much shooting the ball. And perhaps you would lump Alex Abrinas in there. He's a 25-year-old shooter. So that leaves 5 guys who really we don't know what they are. And nobody really knows yet what they are. That's not counting guys down on the G League when you're talking about P.J. Dozier and DeAndre Burton. So at least 7 sort of developing wings, guys like Terrence Ferguson, Diallo, Abdel Nader, Terrence Ferguson, and Timothy
Luwawu-Cabarrot.
Outstanding. TLC.
TLC.
Is it a case of basically 7 seeds have been planted, and you just hope 1 or 2 sprouts and blossoms and turns into a nice looking player?
It's a hybrid of that phrase, throw blank at the wall. It's throw seeds. Like, you were talking about seeds just now. You plant the young seeds and you hope that a few grow and blossom into something. You got a guy in TLC who you saw his minutes decrease in his second year in Philadelphia, as Philadelphia brought in a guy like Markelle Fultz and JJ Redick. So you're hoping that he could come here and get some more wing minutes and be essentially like a poor man's Thabo Sefolosha. He's got good free throw percentages. He's a guy who hasn't shot the ball particularly well in his career, but he's still 24 years old. He stands to improve playing with better players around him and getting better looks. So TLC's a guy who's going to be on the roster to start the season, along with a Hamidou Diallo, who's obviously just incredible athleticism, showed that at Summer League, but he's more of a developmental prospect. You would hope a guy like TLC can be a guy who can contribute a little bit more immediately for the Thunder this season.
8 wings on the squad. Seems like Kyle Singler's value is at an all-time low. What's the chances he's on the roster come training camp?
I would say slim. Right now, I think it's 15 guys, and I suspect they will probably enter the season with 14. It doesn't mean they couldn't make another major move or semi-major move, trade a couple of guys for 1 or whatever. But I would say right now the odds are that before at least before the season starts and probably before camp starts, you'll see Kyle Singler either traded into somebody's cap space for minimal to no return, maybe money, maybe a second-round pick down the road. or you'll see him waived and stretched, that $5 million stretched over the course of 5 years. I suspect that he will not be on the camp roster.
Is the Thunder likely to stay at 14, keep the open roster spot, you think, and see what happens come February or March?
That's what they did last year. They kept that spot open. It would probably be an advantage for them to do so, just in case they want to work another potential trade, going into the trade deadline and potentially taking another player. I think they've shown they're obviously willing to spend money. The Carmelo Anthony contract was one where they were going to have a crazy 9-figure luxury tax. They're still in the high 80s, low 90s in terms of luxury tax. I think around 93 or 92 million dollars in luxury tax if the season ended today. So this team's going to spend money. It's just a matter of who can make the team better and who they're willing to bring in. And if it's somebody that can help the team, then they're going to be okay with spending the money that they're spending right now.
At what point do we get to sort of take a breath and say, well, nothing's going to happen for a while? Are we close
Never.
to there?
We're close. Now, maybe you could say after the trade deadline in February is when we really get to do that. But they are close to being done. Whether there's a trade out there, I think it was last year when they got Raymond Felton and Patrick Patterson, somebody asked Sam Presti in his press conference, are you done? And he said, you're never done. You're never done building a team. So it never totally stops, but we're close to that point of sort of sitting back and saying this is what the team is going to look like.
And is it so long to a somewhat familiar face and a relatively less familiar face? Corey Brewer, Josh Eustace, are they gone from the Thunder?
I think it's a high possibility they are. Corey Brewer was a guy who came in and kind of solidified the starting unit once Andre Robertson got hurt last year, but he was a player on a minimum contract. They didn't expect a ton out of him. He helped them in terms of their pace, but he wasn't a game changer in any sort of way. And Josh Eustace was a guy who they didn't pick up his option last year, so the writing was kind of on the wall with Josh Eustace. You'd essentially see a guy like Abdel Nader being a guy who's a Josh Eustace replacement in size and the ability to do things on the perimeter and guard at the power forward position. So I think the writing's on the wall for those guys. They're clearly going with some younger, more developmental prospects, guys who can kind of fill in the gaps there. And it was going to be tough for Josh Eustace to get minutes even if he did come back because, frankly, he just didn't have the trust of Billy Donovan. So for Josh Eustace, it looks like he's probably going to be on the outside looking in, and Corey Brewer's a guy who's probably going to be looking for another home too.
I think you can't stress enough, Hamidou Diallo is 7 years younger than Josh Eustace. That's a huge gap when you're talking about developing a guy. If you have to make a choice there, I think you're going with the 19-year-old.
Well, lots of wings in the Thunder Corral. None of them Carmelo Anthony. Stay tuned for further Thunder coverage here on News OK and every day in the Oklahoman.